Thanks, Jane. You're watching South East Today. Our top story tonight: bullying, harassment and a culture of fear, how a report describes conditions at the largest hospital trust in Sussex. The husband of a woman who died within days of giving birth says hospital staff argued over whether a caesarean section was needed. No trains running at all today and limited services tomorrow. Commuters in the region face more travel misery due to fresh strike action. And the final countdown. Brighton prepares for Eurovision. We're live at one of the big screens in the city. Hello. The NHS Trust that runs Brighton's main hospital has been heavily criticised and downgraded after whistleblowers prompted an inspection which found staff and patients were being let down by senior leaders. A damning report by inspectors from the Care Quality Commission found that bullying and harassment was unaddressed. Staff were pressured into making unsafe decisions, and minority ethnic staff were more likely to experience poorer outcomes than their white colleagues. The Trust says it understands the challenges and has already made significant progress. Here's our health correspondent, Mark Norman.
It's not great timing. This £500 million hospital rebuild in Brighton will open its doors to patients in a few weeks' time. But just as the Trust should be celebrating, it will actually be dealing with the fallout from today's highly critical CQC report that talks about a culture of normalising safety concerns, a perception data was made to look better to avoid bad news, and a management style perceived as autocratic and bureaucratic. Leading that management team, the chief executive, in post for less than a year when inspectors visited the Trust.
It's really important to me how our staff feel. Really important that staff feel able to speak up, because that's a safe organisation and one in which I would want to be able for every member to speak up so that we can make improvements. And it's disappointing to hear, what the CQC found. We've been working on that since I arrived. So month on month we're seeing improvements in the number of staff who feel able to speak up. We measure that through a pulse survey, and we've seen a significant improvement over the last 6 months. So we're now only a few percentages below the best performing organisation in the NHS.
The chief executive's challenges are many, but begin with convincing his staff and those who oversee the Trust that changes are both happening and happening quickly.
I am deeply concerned about the report. I think it is very serious. Having said that, I spoke with the chief executive yesterday and I sought his reassurance that urgent action would be taken. He explained that, in a sense, it wasn't a surprise to him because he'd commissioned his own external review shortly after taking on the post, and to that extent he knew that what some of the problems were. I think the question is how fast we're going to see action to address them.
It is frustrating for us, it's frustrating for our members. We find that management try to brush it under the carpet and move on. Unfortunately, that seems to be the culture, that they try to run it with a rod of iron.
When it opens, the new hospital will make a significant difference to both patient care and the patient experience, and will also impact staff who get to work in one of the most modern hospital environments in the NHS. It's incumbent on the Trust management to make the most of that opportunity.
Well, Mark's here now. So the hospital says it's already addressing a lot of these issues, but clearly it doesn't sound great for members of staff, doesn't sound great for patients.
There's no getting away from it. It's an awful report and, it's impacting on patient care, some of these issues. That's a bad thing. Are the Trust aware of it? Yes, they are at board level. Are they doing something about it? Clearly, they would argue they are. But there are some major issues. There are now some toxic relationships between staff and senior managers, and then again between senior managers and consultants and the board, and they've been ongoing for some time. George Finley, the chief executive, needs to address that. He's not without his share of responsibility either. He was medical director for many years at this trust before going to Medway and coming back, so he knew what he was walking into. We need to see that change quickly, and the merger is a problem. Hospitals in Chichester and Worthing doing very well. They feel they're being dragged down by the Royal Sussex. Care Quality Commission highlighted a number of positives around the leadership team, but have also called for a massive level of support for the Trust to try and get itself out of this.
Mark, as always, thank you. The husband of a woman who died within days of giving birth says the surgeon and midwife at the William Harvey Hospital in Ashford had a heated argument over whether she needed a caesarean. An inquest is being held into her death and that of Kimberly Sampson, who died 7 weeks earlier, also within days of giving birth. Both women had contracted a strain of the herpes virus. Sarah Smith reports now from Maidstone.
Samantha Mulcahy had been suffering a difficult labour. There were concerns she had preeclampsia and that her baby daughter, her first child, was stuck. Today, in a statement, her husband described to the inquest into his wife's death the scene he witnessed at the William Harvey Hospital that day. Ryan Mulcahy said his wife was exhausted and extremely upset, that the midwife was getting concerned. They discussed the options and Sam opted for a caesarean. But the surgeon had said that wasn't appropriate and that she should keep pushing. Mr Mulcahy said the midwife and the surgeon had started arguing and things had got quite heated. He said he looked across to his wife's mother, also at the bedside, and thought, what is going on? We're trusting these people and they're arguing. Eventually the surgeon did carry out an emergency caesarean, but Sam died 8 days later. That was just 44 days after the death of Kimberly Sampson. She'd also had a caesarean, the same surgeon at the same East Kent Trust, but this time at the QEQM hospital in Margate. Both women had contracted a strain of herpes and suffered multiple organ failure. The inquest into their deaths has been hearing evidence into whether they may have got the virus from the surgeon who'd carried out their procedures. The coroner will hand down her findings at a hearing next month. Sarah Smith, BBC South East Today, Maidstone.
A 29-year-old man suspected of shooting dead a 36-year-old woman during a standoff with police has died in hospital. Armed officers and a trained negotiator were called to a terraced house in Dartford on Saturday after reports of a disturbance. The woman, Hayley Burke, died on Monday evening after being taken to a London hospital. 29-year-old Jacob Cloak died from firearm injuries yesterday. The former MP for Gillingham and Rainham, Paul Clark, has been jailed for more than 2 years for possessing and distributing sexual images of children. The 66-year-old, who represented the Kent constituency for 10 years, was sentenced at Maidstone Crown Court. The father of two was told by the judge he had committed a serious crime. Paul Clark's name has been added to the sex offenders list. Rail passengers faced fresh travel chaos today as thousands of train drivers and other workers go on strike in a long-running dispute over pay. Members of the drivers' union ASLEF are staging a walkout today at more than a dozen train operators, crippling services across the country. There are no Southern, Gatwick Express, Thameslink or South Eastern trains at all running today. ASLEF said a 4% pay offer was risible and obviously unacceptable. It's believed the Eurovision final in Liverpool and the Women's FA Cup final are just a couple of the major events that could be affected by ongoing strike action.
Train driver is paid an average of just shy of £60,000 for a 35-hour week. This would take their pay up to £65,000. There's no change to the hours. So I believe that not only is it a generous pay rise, and bear in mind that their pay's gone up almost 40% since 2011. They've had the highest pay rise per employment category since then.
Well, another strike is planned by the RMT union tomorrow when just a fraction of normal services are expected to run. Its General Secretary Mick Lynch joined me earlier and I began by asking him what he'd like to say to our viewers who are badly affected by this action.
Well, we're sorry for the action that we have to take, but we haven't got a solution to our dispute because the government's not facilitating negotiations that will get us there. We've been involved in this for over a year now, and there was a long run-up. The government knows what needs to be done. And because of the anti-union laws that we've got in this country, we have to name our action 14 days in advance. And we have a legal mandate where we have to put this action on this weekend, otherwise it runs out. Now, we've got another further mandate that's come in for 6 months. And we will take the action necessary to pursue our campaign. What we want is a fair settlement. We want job security for our people, we want to protect their conditions, and we want a fair pay deal, and that's not on the table at the moment.
Clearly you're coming from one perspective, the government is coming from the opposite perspective. Where is that key middle ground? What do you need the government to offer for you to recommend your members accept?
Well, we need a set of proposals that we can deal with. At the moment, they keep putting things in front of us that they know are unacceptable, and they've got to change that position. I think what they're doing for many workers at the moment is trying to clamp down on wages. We've heard about inflation, but they seem to be blaming workers who haven't had a pay rise, so cannot have contributed to inflation, for their problems, which are down to the economic policies of the government and conditions outside of railway workers and other workers' control.
But isn't it the case that since the pandemic, people are able to work more flexibly, fewer people are commuting? Shouldn't you be trying to lure people back onto the railways to use your services to keep your members in their jobs rather than put on continual strikes, which is going to push people even further away?
Well, it's certainly true that people have changed their working patterns, but that's been more than made up with by different patterns of travel. Leisure travel and different forms of travel have come in to replace that, and passenger numbers are up. What they're telling us now is we haven't got enough staff. They're cancelling trains because there aren't enough people. At the same time, they're telling us we must have redundancies. So we're demanding a fair pay rise to replace the losses we've had over 4 years, and we want to get on with the job of serving the public and getting the railways back in a good condition to serve all of the people of this region and across Britain.
Mick Lynch, RMT General Secretary, thank you for joining us. A Romanian man who smuggled 4 Vietnamese migrants to Dover inside the roof of a van has been jailed for 3 years. Nikolai Bogdan Lungan hid the 4 17-year-olds in a compartment which the Immigration Minister has described as coffin-like. They were found by Border Force lying on bare metal in the cramped and badly ventilated hide. The Archbishop of Canterbury has been convicted of speeding after being caught by a camera in London. Justin Welby was driving a Volkswagen Golf along the Albert Embankment towards Lambeth Palace over the 20-mile-an-hour limit. He was given 3 penalty points and fined £300 with a 120 victim surcharge. A former golf course in Kent is being rewilded under a scheme which raises money by selling carbon credits to companies wanting to improve their environmental credentials. Carbon offsetting schemes try to balance emissions by finding other ways to reduce carbon in the atmosphere. Heather Corrie Vale is a 125-acre site near Sevenoaks and is one of the first to benefit from Kent Wildlife Trust's Wilder Carbon Initiative. Our environment correspondent Yvette Austin explains.
For more than 90 years, this was considered one of the finest golf courses in Kent, immaculately kept on the top of the North Downs in the heart of an area of outstanding natural beauty. But after its closure in 2019, nature is now taking over and being given a helping hand.
This is an incredible site. We don't often get a blank canvas site like this. You know, former golf course, you can already see the scrub and the species encroaching onto it. Heavy grazing of this site for a couple of years to clear all this thatch out, and then we're going to allow it basically to wood up, turn into what we call wood pasture, grazed with trees over the top. That in turn, the animals will be longhorn cattle, possibly some pigs as well, and then we'll see all the kind of wildlife coming off the back of that. The beauty of it is that's going to then obviously be locking up the carbon that we want to see happen on the site. Eventually we're going to see, you know, this kind of wooded pasture type system, and it's going to be amazing because this is what this is all about. This is about carbon finance restoring nature and then nature locking up the carbon for us. It's the perfect kind of virtuous circle that we're trying to promote.
Bringing back nature like this costs money, and so investment is coming from companies wanting to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions. The way it works is that experts estimate how much carbon a site will lock up over the next 50 years if nature is restored. This site is thought to be capable of removing 9,000 tonnes of carbon from the atmosphere. 9,000 tonnes is then divided into 9,000 units, and businesses can buy the units for £75 each. One company buying into the scheme is a salad-producing vertical farm in Sandwich. They're not legally obliged to reduce their emissions, but they want to.
We're very focused on reducing emissions, so we're 100% renewable, so we're low carbon on that. But there are obviously other areas of the business that have emissions associated with distribution and packaging and some of the materials that we buy. So we're very focused on reducing those wherever we can, but where we can't reduce those emissions, we're going to be focusing on removals. So the residual emissions that we can't reduce, we're going to be removing through this Wilder Carbon Initiative.
Only companies who can demonstrate they're truly committed to reducing their emissions and helping the environment will be allowed to buy the units from this wilder carbon scheme.
We need to be focusing on sustainable action. So this is about focusing on harnessing the power of nature to do what it's been doing for millions of years and locking up carbon in a resilient way. And if we can do that, it's going to allow wildlife to thrive, and it's going to assure that that carbon is locked up for generations to come.
So as time progresses, the golf course will turn from this to this. And the plan is for more sites to be transformed across the country as the project grows and attracts more environmentally conscious businesses. Yvette Austin, BBC South East Today, West Kingsdown.
Now it's coming up to 10 to 7, a reminder of our top story tonight. The NHS Trust that runs Brighton's main hospital has been heavily criticised and downgraded after whistleblowers prompted an inspection. The critical CQC report found bullying, people pressured into making unsafe decisions, and minority ethnic staff more likely to experience problems than their white colleagues. Also in tonight's programme. Bluebells in bloom. Nature lovers in the southeast are treated to a stunning spring display, but not for much longer.
And today may have been grey and cloudy, but the weekend is looking dry and sunny. I've got the full forecast later in the programme.
Now, have you been avoiding it like the plague, or have you caught Eurovision fever yet? The final lineup are warming up their vocal cords as big screens spring up across the UK to live stream the event on BBC One tomorrow night. Let's cross straight over to Chrissy, who is lucky enough to be at one such collective viewing experience in what some might say is the spiritual home of Eurovision, Brighton, of course. Hello, Chrissy. Oh, it looks fun already. I didn't think it was going to get going till tomorrow. What's happening?
Well, it's buzzing, Ellie, that's what. But then you could say, when isn't Brighton buzzing? So the big screen, the big Eurovision screen is somewhere behind me down there. Underneath that canopy, that's where all the action will be tomorrow. If you want to come and see the Eurovision Song Contest live, at midday tomorrow, there'll be a special sing-along hosted by a local Ukrainian choir. They'll be singing the Beatles track with a little help from my friends. While they're singing here at midday around the world, other choirs will be singing it too, and the idea is to bring people together, to unite people through the power of music. The countdown is on until this year's final of Eurovision. Eurovision fan Anastasia, who's from Ukraine, has been living in Brighton for the past year after fleeing the war.
Absolutely huge Eurovision fan. I watched it since maybe I was 8 or something like that. Just then I realized that I want to be a singer.
And tomorrow she'll get her chance as she joins other Ukrainian women for a special sing-along by the big screen in Jubilee Square.
Would you stand up and walk out on me?
They'll be joined by other choirs from around the world.
So tomorrow is a huge global event. We're hoping it will be the biggest singing flash mob ever, where people from all over the world are invited to come together and sing the Beatles with a little help from my friends at midday, wherever they are in the world.
Of course, Brighton's connection with Eurovision goes way back. The city hosted the contest in 1974 when ABBA won.
Brighton has really strong historical connections with Eurovision, and as a city we're really diverse and open, and we all love Eurovision and we all love taking part in it.
So in Brighton this weekend, it's all about the music.
It's so welcoming, it's so inclusive, it's fun, it's silly, it's bright, it's just this, sometimes it's quite emotional. There's nothing to dislike about it.
Music can connect to anybody, no matter what walk of life you're from, whether you're a carpenter or musician. Everyone finds something they enjoy.
So wherever you are, it's the weekend to unite through music. Get ready to sing and celebrate. So if you do want a party, I guess this is the place to come tomorrow, Jubilee Square. It coincides with an annual music festival, The Great Escape. Lots of emerging musicians and artists that'll be performing around Brighton, all across Brighton in lots of different venues. I guess really, Ellie, there's only one question to ask. Who have you got your money on to win?
Oh, that'd be telling, Chrissy. That'd be telling. I tell you what, I have got my money on, though, that the sun's going to shine tomorrow. And stay with us for a full forecast coming up a bit later on. And you can, of course, see the Eurovision final in all its spectacular glory right here on BBC One tomorrow night, live from 8 o'clock. Now, it's getting sillier, I warn you. Why did the computer go to the doctor? Because it had a virus. OK, not a hilarious joke, but it is one created by artificial intelligence. As part of a 3-day science event at the University of Kent, a postgraduate student is asking whether AI can do stand-up. Can a computer ever be funny? He's been working with artificial intelligence to create stand-up material with surprising outcomes, as Fiona Irving discovered.
It can assist in hospitals, write an essay, and pack your online order. But is AI ever funny?
Could it do a joke about a glamorous newsreader in a regional TV newsroom?
Okay, I'm going to ask it to generate like 5 one-liners maybe. You are a stand-up comedian. Here we go, so shall I read them?
Yes, please.
Our glamorous newsreader's so dazzling. Her wardrobe's got its own weather segment. High chance of sequins tonight. Not necessarily funny, but that's quite good.
It's quite clever.
Kent graduate Tommy Pargeter-Gray has been working with AI program ChatGPT to see if it can produce material to use in stand-up.
The idea that AI can regurgitate facts and information, that we can understand, it's just data at the end of the day. But the idea that it can actually understand what might be funny based on looking at what people find funny as a whole, and it actually being able to reproduce that with some level of authenticity is honestly like surprising but really interesting.
Time then to road test the jokes on a bunch of tired students in the middle of exam season.
I told my wife that she should embrace her mistakes. She gave me a huge hug.
Okay, next one.
Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field.
The fact that it can almost understand our sense of humour and things like that is just crazy.
I went to the bookstore and asked the salesperson, do you have any books on reverse psychology? They said, sure, but you won't like them.
Right, that's good. Yeah, that's good, yeah.
I told my wife she was drawing her eyebrows too high. She looked surprised. Yeah. Good?
I mean, they're a level up from like dad jokes, but only one level, I think.
All those jokes were created by AI.
Oh, okay.
Think AI's there?
Just like all of my assignments. No, I'm joking. That's a joke.
Now that was funny.
Writers in Hollywood are currently on strike, demanding protection against being replaced by AI. So should stand-up comedians worry?
Honestly, no, because it can take, literally decades to learn to be a really good stand-up comedian. And that's because what you learn is, like, the really tiny things, like if I put a tiny pause there, it's funnier, or if I change that word to that word, or if I just literally step to one side at that moment, it can be funnier. I don't see computers being able to do that anytime soon.
But that won't stop AI at least trying to make us laugh.
Our glamorous newsreader brings a whole new meaning to the term breaking news. She's broken 3 hills already, strutting through the newsroom.
Fiona Irving, BBC South East Today, Canterbury.
Dear, oh dear. Now, it has been hard to believe we're in spring at times, hasn't it? But that blustery weather hasn't stopped the countryside from bursting out with its annual bluebell display. If you want to see them, do hurry, as it really is the last week when they will look at their best. Whole Park Gardens in Roveldon has one of the finest displays in the southeast, and Claudia Sabasis has been along to take a look.
Bluebells. They actually spend most of the year as bulbs underground in our ancient woods. But end of April, beginning of May, they emerge to flower.
Our native bluebell, they all grow naturally here, so they spread by seed and division of the bulbs. They're coming to the end of their season now, but they're still looking quite spectacular.
Here at Hole Park, amidst their 16 acres of garden, the bluebells bloom amongst the wild garlic, as they have for hundreds of years.
And how long have you been gardening here, Quentin?
I've been gardening here for 23 years.
Gosh, you must have seen some changes.
Oh, they have. I mean, I've seen planted plants 20 odd years ago, and now they're becoming quite nice mature specimens.
Yeah.
So hopefully, you know, they'll keep on growing. And
I love how like the primroses are with the bluebells and amongst the garlic. I mean, the colours, nature just curates such a good palette.
it is nature's rich tapestry.
You can recognise these as English bluebells because the flowers are secund, which basically means that they all fall to one side. And you can also tell that this is an English afternoon because the heavens have opened, it's suddenly pouring with rain, and the bluebells don't mind at all because they are pretty tough.
But before long, the sun shone through again, framing the woodbell, fairy flower, wild hyacinth, all names given to our native bluebell. These graceful beauties are now just at the tail end of their best, until next spring. Claudia Sebezis, BBC South East Today, Hole Park.
Ah, well, will the sun shine on those bluebells this weekend? Nina Ridge is here to tell us. Hello, Nina. How's it looking?
Hi, Ellie. Well, this is what we've had today. Grey skies, some light rain and drizzle. Something completely different for the weekend. Sunshine. It is going to be dry for most of the weekend and certainly feeling a lot warmer as well. Today, that cloud has been fed by a weather front coming in off the North Sea. It's brought that patchy rain with it. It's clearing away. And then for the weekend, something we have not seen a great deal of, high pressure is on its way. It should just about last for Sunday, but you will notice this cold front just lurking to the northwest. That does introduce a little more cloud and maybe some showers later on in the day. Now, we could have a few light showers as we go through the night, but for most of us it is going to be dry. Still that feed of cloud around, and temperatures tomorrow morning will be at around about 7 or 8 degrees. But whilst it may be a little misty and murky first thing tomorrow, that sunshine will quickly burn off any cloud and we'll have blue skies to take us through the afternoon. The winds are coming in from the North Sea, so that just keeps temperatures across parts of East Kent at around 17 degrees, but come further inland and we're looking at highs around about 19 to 20 degrees. Clear skies at first, then on Saturday night into the early hours of Sunday we do start to pick up a little more cloud again. We could have some rather misty conditions and temperatures slightly lower at around 6 to 7 degrees. But once again on Sunday, any low cloud shouldn't last too long. We'll brighten things up, we'll pick up the sunshine, and it may even be a little warmer on Sunday with those temperatures a degree or so higher. But the fine weather isn't set to last. That cold front through Monday and Tuesday will head our way, introducing more cloud, some showers, and with a northerly wind we're back down to temperatures around 15 to 16 degrees. Ellie.
Oh dear. Well, we'll enjoy a brief respite in the meantime. Thanks, Nina. That's it from me and the rest of the team for the moment. Piers Hopkirk, though, will be back with your late news update at 10:30. Bye-bye.